Hello, my name is Alex Merced from alexmerced.com, and in this video what I want to do is spend some time talking about some tips on how to talk to non-libertarians, because you got to remember, you're looking to spread the ideas of liberty. You're looking to move people in a more libertarian direction and persuade. Oftentimes people have so many different well-established prejudices, preconceptions of how the world works, that you kind of have to work within that framework to at least free them of where they're currently stuck, so that way they can move further down the rabbit hole down the road. So here are some tips that I've used over the years that I found quite effective when talking to others. Now the first one is that instead of saying smaller government, because what happens is that people have an idea of smaller government being a government that doesn't do the things that they want, and bigger government being one that they do. So using that small, big government, oftentimes people lose sight of that. So what I do is I focus on simpler government, essentially getting to the same place, just different terminology. So I say, how about we move towards a government that's simpler, transparent, more accountable? To emphasize that's where we're going, which means we're not there now. And emphasizing that right now the government is complex. It is unaccountable. It is opaque. And that way, at least you set the framework in a different way, where now, when they look at what the government does now, they'll start seeing that lack of transparency, that unaccountability, that complexity, and they'll start thinking more critically about it. An analogy I use to sort of draw this simple analogy is I compare it to the board game or card game Uno. Uno is a very simple game. Because of that, everybody's willing to play. And you don't necessarily need a referee to referee the game, because everyone knows that if you put a green 2 on a red 4, you're cheating, and one of the players will call you out on it. It's not a very hard thing for all of us to hold each other accountable, because the rules are simple, the game's transparent, so we can hold each other accountable. But when you get to more complicated games, I mean, let's go straight to Dungeons and Dragons, where it requires you to read encyclopedias of books to understand how to play the game, that when you really do play, no one who's actually playing really understands the true rules of the game. So people are kind of making stuff up as they go along, which discourages a lot of people from playing because it's so complicated. And it also makes it easier for people who are playing to cheat. And it's harder to hold each other accountable because no one's quite sure what the rules are. Now, I do love playing some Dungeons and Dragons. It is complicated. Point being is that the same thing holds true for government. When it's simpler, or not just government, for anything, when it's simpler, we can hold each other more accountable, it becomes more transparent. Vice versa, when something's more complicated, it's less transparent, it's harder to hold each other accountable. So let's apply that to government. The second thing I like to emphasize is expediency. People always try to say they want political solutions, regardless of the moral implications, because they want to get things done fast. There's nothing fast about political solutions. Because even though theoretically, once you pass, the government can just force things to happen, it takes election cycle after election cycle, which ends up taking decades to get the change you want to happen. And then the end result is really just a watered down version of what you wanted to happen to begin with. So at the end of the day, in all reality, it's actually more expedient to go the market or community route. And again, be careful which words you use. Some people may be more resonate a market solution. Some people may resonate more with a community solution. They're the same thing. But a community or market solution can happen now, because you don't need to worry about political elections. You don't need to worry about forcing anyone to do things. It's just a matter of you having an idea and convincing other people of the value of that idea. And if there's truly value to your idea and you're able to communicate it, you can put it into place right now. And you don't even have to do a watered down version of it. You can do the version you want, you just have to communicate value. Next, I like to emphasize the idea of coordination. I use the analogy of a weather person. Now, if a weather person told you it was going to rain when it's not going to rain, because they just figured it would be a good idea for you to think it's going to rain, what's going to happen? You're going to be carrying umbrellas that you don't need. On top of that, if you don't have an umbrella, you'll buy umbrellas you don't need. So what happens is that when signals that you depend on for predicting the future are distorted, you make decisions that don't prepare you for the future at all well. This is what happens with the larger economy. Market prices and other market signals are like weather forecasts. They help you predict tomorrow. They help you coordinate your behavior better with what's going to happen tomorrow. But if those market signals are distorted because the government has subsidized certain things, taxed other things, regulated other things, and prices don't reflect the reality of supply and demand, then those signals are distorted, and you're more likely to make investment and consumer decisions that are not in line with what actually happens tomorrow, leading to more mistakes in the economy, which leads to less wealth being created and more despair existing. Also, a lot of people, they have a tendency of demonizing welfare and aid and demonizing those who receive welfare and aid. That is very much the wrong approach. There is a room for aid and welfare. There is people who genuinely need help, and they should get help. The question is, are we doing it the best way we can? Because efficiency and accountability matters. You want to be efficient in the way you distribute aid because you want to make sure you can help as many people with the resources that are available. If you're inefficient, you're helping less people with more resources. But you also want it to be accountable because you don't necessarily want those resources, that aid, going to the people who don't need it, because that means someone who does need it is not getting it. So this is why community or voluntary aid is better, because it is more efficient, because what happens is you have competition. If there's one charity that's more efficient in how they use resources, more people are going to donate to that charity versus another. If there's one charity that's better at vetting who needs to get that aid, they're going to get more charitable dollars. So resources are going to naturally gravitate to where they're most efficiently used and most accountable. While in government, you don't have that competitive process, so you just end up having less accountability, less efficiency, and at the end of the day, you're helping a lot less people than you can be helping, and there's a lot of people who need help. So if you're someone who believes in helping others, then you really want to help bring that efficiency, that accountability, by emphasizing a voluntary, more community-based aid system. And last, but certainly not least, is be careful of the terminology used, because a lot of times we say public versus private property. But when you use the term public, it just kind of automatically insinuates that everybody has access to it. But there are public facilities that are quite guarded from anybody and are quite secretive. They're anything but public. A public property really is just government-owned property. And that's the term you should use to make it very clear. Because again, the word public puts you at a disadvantage from the get-go because of the word, and it's inaccurate. Vice versa, instead of saying private property, which makes it seem like society does not have access to it, while I have more access to a Macy's, which is privately owned, than I do to a military compound, which is publicly owned. So those words are inaccurate and they insinuate things that are going to put you at a disadvantage rhetorically. So use government-owned property, like the military complex, and use individually owned property or even voluntarily owned property in reference to things like the Macy's store, etc. It's just more accurate. It also doesn't trigger preconceived notions that put you at a disadvantage rhetorically. My name is Alex Merced, and I hope you enjoyed these tips and employ them when you talk to people around. And have a great day, and thank you very much. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, like the Facebook pages, subscribe to the podcast, and thank you very much.